Greetings from the New York Times travel show at the Jacob K. Javits Convention Center in ever beautiful I Love New York. Now we are at one of the neighboring states' booths, Salem, Massachusetts, and I'm lucky to be here with the cast of Cry Innocent. Good afternoon, good afternoon, good afternoon, good afternoon. And welcome to 1692, is that correct?
That is correct.
If we could start from left to right and introduce ourselves.
Hello, my name is Lamaris. I play Bridget Bishop.
My name is Connor. I play the witnesses.
My name is Macy. I also play several witnesses.
My name is Carl. I play the judge, Colonel John Hawthorne.
Now, the wonderful thing about seeing Cry Innocent is that within the travel show, there is a performance stage. And this is an actual theater production that is running, and we could see you on the streets of Salem, Massachusetts. So let's talk about the theater production Cry Innocent. And again, I'll start from my right and move on. How do you prepare for a role 1692? What are some of the essentials to portray that era?
There is a lot of research involved in doing something like this because we do attempt to make it as authentic as possible. So researching clothing styles and customs and politics and all sorts of things like that.
And what would one of the attire pieces be that would be of a Euro influence but yet still be Puritan America? What would be something specific to your wardrobe that would be 1692?
This bodice, for example, would be kind of a typical style. One of the things that I learned that was kind of nifty is the Puritans wore a lot more colors than we give them credit for.
Thank you, I didn't know that one.
Yes,
that's good. See, this is what I was talking about.
Reds and purples and greens, you'd be surprised. And
the very religious folk as well?
Absolutely, absolutely. Color was not a sin.
So you had freedom within your wardrobe to portray 1692 for color?
Absolutely, absolutely, and that was a lot of fun.
Now, in today's show, Cry Innocent, we saw you as many people, but not as a specter. Can you explain what is a specter and how do you portray different characters within the same exact show?
Well, a specter in 1692 was what we would primarily call a ghostly figure today. And in the show, I play multiple people, and it is a lot of practice to get into each character. But it has to do with just practicing timing and going into your costume and then getting into the mindset of these, whether it be a manic character or a straight-laced and just straightforward kind of guy. I mean, those are the kind of people I play, and it's a lot of. Yeah, like I said, it's a lot of practice that you just have to get into the routine, and once you're really in that space, it becomes really easy.
Now, which is more fun when you're playing the religious character or the crazy New Englander?
It's much more fun to play the crazy guy because it gets a lot of laughs and people enjoy watching somebody just go crazy on stage, and that's the kind of guy I like to be.
And now, might I ask, this is a street character, so to speak, and we actually do see you performing on the streets of Salem, Massachusetts. But within your role of Cry Innocent, you are sort of a street character within a street character show. Can you explain that to folks who have yet to see the Cry Innocent performance?
So one of our favorite things to do on street is actually to advertise for the show with our own Puritan sort of alter egos almost. We choose a different one every year if you would like, or you can work on the same one. But on the streets of Salem, if you would see me over the summer, I would introduce myself as Mehedable Langley, who is just Salem's apothecary's wife. And I would have a whole backstory. I could get into conversations with the tourists and in talking to them, be able to say, oh, Goody Bishop is having her trial today. What do you think of that? And it's kind of bringing them into the world and also telling them about the show at the same time, so they understand where we're coming from.
Do you have a one-liner that you use when you're out on the street that you know always is going to work? Like, oh, did you hear what they did to Bishop? Do you have something that you say that you know that always grabs them when you're improving?
My favorite thing to say is, oh my soul, because it's a pretty sort of exclamation for them, and usually they're like, oh my soul what? And I'm like, oh, did you hear about Bridget Bishop? So yeah, it's fun to see how dramatic you can be on stage or on the street, and you'd be surprised how much you can get away with.
And do you believe at Bridget Bishop's orchard that you could actually smell apple pies in the restaurant that resides there today? Do you believe that story?
I've been to that restaurant. It smells more like seafood because it is a seafood restaurant, but it smells great. I'll say that.
Thank you. Now, you have so many lines. You're really conducting the whole town and running the show. How much of this is improv and how much of it is specifically scripted? Because you do play with the audience by the end of the show, and you are the main speaker in the version that we saw today. How much of this was improv and how much it is direct rewriting to portray 1692?
So there are a lot of very specific lines, and they're very important lines, because one of the key things about the show is that we took a lot of it directly from her pre-trial transcript. So it's important to get a lot of those right. Almost everything that involves interacting with the audience, though, that is going to be improvised. And that's where all the research that Lamaris was talking about comes in, because we have to be able to answer any question that the audience might ask us correctly, and there's no way to script that. So it really is just immersing yourself in the world so that you can confidently and quickly answer any question that anyone might ask. I'd say it's probably about 60% heavily scripted, and the rest of it is improvised.
Are people throwing you improv questions from the audience from 1692? Because a lot of the visitors of Salem, they know the story and they've read a lot of the lines. Are you seeing mostly people giving you direct, like the one I threw to you today, whose land is going to be next? Or is it more modern questions that they're asking you?
Well, that's actually really interesting, because we get a little bit of both. Most people have read The Crucible, and so we get a lot of Crucible questions, which I kind of like, because The Crucible is a thing Arthur Miller made up and didn't do a lot of research into. So there's a lot of misconceptions that come from things like that. And it is actually really nice when we get those questions, because then you can explain to people how things actually went in many cases. Like, for example, the fact that you can't take somebody's land if you accuse them of witchcraft. That's a thing that Nathaniel Hawthorne sort of made up a while later for House of Seven Gables. So it's nice to get a lot of those questions. And some of them are just very, very silly.
Let's go to the fun and silly stuff. We are representing Salem, Massachusetts here. Let's talk about Salem, Massachusetts. What have you learned performing in which city, comparing Witchcraft 1692 to how witches are celebrated in Salem, Massachusetts today?
Well, the Puritans had a very specific definition of witchcraft. You made a deal with the devil. You signed his book, you shook his hand, and the devil gave you power to do bad things to people in your community. Modern witches in Salem are not practicing witchcraft by that definition of the word. As I understand it, it's kind of an earth-based religion. Some of them are exploring pre-Christian European-based religions and things like that. And there are lots of shopkeepers and tour guides and things that love to explain that as well, and could do it a lot better than I could.
And what have you learned from the modern witchcraft community in Salem, Massachusetts, portraying 1692? What has the modern community taught you?
Modern community has really, along with Lamaris, I'm in the same boat. I've just been witness to it. I haven't really learned much other than that it is earth-based. It is really just out there in the nether to me. I know what was in the past, and I'm not really attuned with what is present in the witchcraft community today.
So could I ask you then about the Maritime Festival? Have you performed there?
No, I have not.
Favorite thing about Salem, Massachusetts?
I love the history that's in it. When I started working here about 2 years ago, I had no clue what anything was in Salem, what the Salem Witchcraft Trials were, but there is so much to learn, especially when you're in Salem. I'm not trying to be a travel agent here, but it is...
We are at the Salem booth.
But it is a beautiful area, just rich with history. Anything around there is just chock full of facts that you wouldn't know otherwise.
Thank you very much. And speaking of facts, jumping around, Salem Town, Salem Village, Danvers. Can you break down how that is all part of the story? 3 different locations that are actually 2 locations with 3 different names. Danvers, Salem Town, and Salem Village.
Right, so back in the 17th century, Salem was split into 2 major locations. Like you said, we have Salem Town. That is what we would consider Salem today in 2019. That was much more urban, a lot more business was done there because it was closer to the seaport and a lot of trade happened. Whereas Salem Village is actually half of Salem and most of Danvers at that time. That was much more rural, homesteads were much farther apart, it was a lot more farming. They were not on the same sort of like social level as the Salem Town. And Danvers would have been, as it was called Danvers at that time, just a kind of a sliver of land just past it. Now there are other surrounding towns. There was still Beverly, there was still places like Topsfield, but it was much more widespread. They hadn't really condensed as much as you would see them in the 21st century.
Thank you. Now my question comes to you from reviews that I have read about Salem, Massachusetts. Some folks who practice witchcraft said it's a little bit too kitschy, too much plastic Halloween decorations. Do you feel that Salem is too witchy, and have they exploited the witchcraft trials for their benefit, or is it all in good fun?
I mean, I think it depends on, you can't say that about like one specific town. You know, certain people do. I think some of it is, very kitschy, especially in regards to that. But there's also a lot of people out there doing a lot of really good work, trying to make a really not very well understood piece of American history get out there to people. I think that there's a big juxtaposition too between the history and a lot of the witchier, kitschier stuff. But I think that there's a place for both of those things. And I think those can exist in harmony with each other without being in competition in any way.
Last round, we're going to go from this way to this way. Your favorite thing about Salem, Massachusetts is?
Oh man, it's just such an old city, and I love the fact that I can, as someone who's really big into Salem history, that I can read about places in 17th century documents from hundreds of years ago, and I can go to a lot of those places, and I can see exactly where that site would have been. It's so nice to be able to do that.
I've done that. It is fun. Favorite thing about Salem, Massachusetts today?
The wharf, for sure. It's a really beautiful walk. There's a huge long wharf, a lighthouse at the end. The ocean is just absolutely gorgeous. And we do actually have an old trading ship, the Friendship. It's being worked on right now, but we're hoping to get it back soon. It's a beautiful replica of what a trading ship would have looked like, and it's a really beautiful experience.
And isn't that by Enchanted, the official witch of Salem, Massachusetts, Lori Cabot's shop?
I believe
She's
Lori
on the
Cabot's, Lori Cabot's, I believe, is actually more on Essex Street, a little bit more closer to downtown.
No, the new shop, Enchanted, I believe, is on the wharf.
Oh,
I
wow.
think that might be true.
It's news to me.
I don't keep up with it.
Favorite thing about Salem, Massachusetts?
The people. They dress eccentric, and I love that. I've learned a lot from the people I've met in Salem. I go to school in Boston, but being in Salem just gives me this insight to these kind of people that either practice witchcraft or don't practice witchcraft and just love the history. I made a lot of friends here, and it's a fantastic place.
I love that it has a little bit of everything. It has the witchcraft history. It has colonial history. It has maritime history. There are woods to explore. There are museums to look at. There's beautiful places to eat. There's just so much going on in Salem, and it has something for everyone.
And I am going to agree. I love Salem, Massachusetts, and I implore you to visit for yourself. Till next time, from the New York Times Travel Show with the cast of Cry Innocent.